This is Reset. I'm Lisa Labus in for Sasha-Ann Simons. It is Friday and just afternoon, so it's time for the weekly news recap where we take a deep dive into the biggest state and local stories.
Chicago Public Schools leaders were gathered at a news conference today to celebrate the record-high 2022 graduation rate and scholarship totals.
Chicago City Council members have a few more weeks to consider Mayor Lori Lightfoot's massive $16 billion spending plan before they're expected to vote on it.
As you know, budgets are not just math problems. They are and must be value statements.
Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson officially announced his bid for mayor.
Chicago is an amazing city. It's a beautiful city. It's a rich city. It's a powerful city. It is my city.
We have a lot to talk about on our panel today. We've got Dave McKinney from WBEZ, our state politics reporter. Hi, Dave.
Lisa, good to see you.
And Paris Schutz, reporter and anchor at WTTW. Hi, Paris.
Hey, Lisa.
All right, if you're online right now, you can watch us break down the week's news live or later at your own convenience. Head over to WBEZ's Facebook or YouTube pages. I want to get started with the mayor's race. Big news yesterday. Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson has joined a super crowded race. Paris, tell us a little bit about Johnson.
Well, in addition to being Cook County Commissioner, he's an organizer for the Chicago Teachers Union. He just got $1 million in backing from the National Teachers Union. It's very clear he is the Teachers Union's candidate to run for mayor of Chicago. The Teachers Union is taking another crack at being a big political power player in Chicago. 4 years ago, they backed Toni Preckwinkle. It didn't go so well. She lost big to Mayor Lori Lightfoot. So Brandon Johnson, he also has gotten support from other progressive groups. He's trying to kind of make the case that I'm not just the teachers union candidate, although it's very clear he's who they're going to back. And that makes it very interesting for someone like Congressman Chuy Garcia, who was kind of the progressive beacon several years ago. All those progressive groups are kind of spoken for now,
right.
And he hasn't decided whether or not he's going to get into the race, even though there are people on his behalf passing out petitions just in case he does decide, but it seems like his path is going to be narrowing.
Right. So, Johnson is backed by the Chicago Teachers Union, like you mentioned, and this group making it very clear they want one of their own in that seat. What has Commissioner Johnson's time with this group looked like so far? How much oomph would you say a union endorsement gives a candidate?
It didn't give Preckwinkle a whole lot, especially in that runoff 4 years ago. So the evidence to this point is that it doesn't put them over the top, but they're banking on trying this again and being the major it's not just the teachers union. There's other unions and progressive groups getting behind him.
Sure.
How far he goes in this race will prove how big a power broker that the teachers union and those progressive groups are. And I think it remains to be seen. This is a wide open field. He is going to have money because of that support, but it does not guarantee that he's going to be the front runner.
No. Yeah. So, Dave, there's been a feeling among some political watchers that none of the candidates in the race had the money or the clout to really be a legitimate challenger to Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Do you think Johnson is any different?
Well, I mean, it's to his advantage, obviously, to be coming in with the backing of the CTU. I mean, they are a force regardless of what their track record is. They have people on the ground, obviously. They have purse strings to play with in terms of handing out money. So, I mean, that gives him an advantage right now. But I do agree with Paris that if Chuy Garcia enters the race, that kind of it creates an entirely different dynamic where he would have to be regarded as the main front runner in challenging Mayor Lightfoot. Okay,
so we've now heard Chuy Garcia's name twice. Are we expecting more candidates to run for mayor? Do you assume that Garcia is going to is he a lock for entering?
I don't think he is. I think there are people that are circulating petitions that want him to get in, and he will have a formidable base yet, even though these progressive groups are kind of spoken for. He's still super popular in the Latino community in Chicago. I would also keep an eye on Pat Quinn, the former governor, who kind of fancies himself as a progressive type of lion and someone that could get support in the Latino community. If Garcia doesn't get in, and I'm very skeptical that he is going to get in. I really haven't seen a lot of evidence that he really wants to do this. I would say Pat Quinn might do it.
Okay, all right. Well, so Dave, you've covered a lot of elections. How hard is it for a candidate to distinguish themselves when there are this many in the race? I think we've got 9 now with Johnson entering yesterday.
Well, I mean, it is hard. And you're either coming at it with the experience and name recognition of having held office before, That's an advantage. Or you're coming at it with lots and lots of money to throw into direct mail pieces and advertising to sort of heighten your name recognition. But when you have a splintered group like this, the rule of thumb is it tends to mean that it's an advantage for the incumbent because it splinters the opposition to the incumbent.
Sure. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about endorsements. So we've got, Brandon Johnson with the CTU endorsement, and Mayor Lightfoot got Governor Pritzker's endorsement back in August. Dave, how much weight do you think this carries in the city of Chicago?
Well, I think it could carry some weight because, if you go back and you just look at the raw vote totals, that's where I would look first. In 2018, Pritzker did quite well in the city and in Cook County broadly, but particularly in the city. In the race against Bruce Rauner, he had more than 722,000 votes, which that's about double what Mayor Lightfoot got in her runoff election against Preckwinkle. So,
right.
The numbers, Pritzker brings with it the name recognition, and he's a quite valuable endorsement for her to have.
And she's also gotten endorsement from trade unions, the more kind of working class unions. The progressive groups are not going with her. She was a progressive candidate 4 years ago. I don't think she's going to be the self-styled progressive candidate this time around. She's almost putting together that old Rahm Emanuel coalition.
Okay, all right. Well, before we move on I want to talk about the city budget next, but I want to introduce Kim Egonmwan, commentator for WVON and an attorney who is now joining our panel. Hi, Kim.
Hi, it's so good to see you.
Oh, glad you could make it. So I want to start with you then. Let's go to the city budget. Mayor Lightfoot earlier this week unveiled a $16 billion spending plan. And right now we've got budget hearing after budget hearing. So tell me a little bit about what the main pieces of the budget plan include.
Well, in this budget, I think the one thing that people are really trying to pay attention to is what it doesn't include, and that's the property tax increases that people were expecting were going to take place. But it definitely is focusing on what we need for public safety, because there are a lot of issues with that. Also mental health, because years ago, you may remember this, they shut down a lot of mental health clinics. So I know that a lot of people will want to see more money in that area, more focus on homelessness in particular. But also this idea of public transportation. So that's another piece of the budget with the CTU in particular. And there has been an issue with CTU. There has been a lot of public safety issues there. There have been a lot of what we call ghost buses. Yeah. And those of us who take it, you're waiting for a bus or you're waiting for an L and it never comes, that type of thing. There has been disputes about the actual chairman of CTA just coming and actually sitting during, which is standard practice for a budget hearing. You want to hear from the actual department head, but he has been a no-show to the degree that when one of the aldermen wore a costume the other day, he basically was a CTA ghost.
I saw that.
So there are some pieces that definitely people are looking at and just trying to figure out what are the real priorities of this administration.
Okay. I just want to correct myself. I said the budget was unveiled earlier this week. It was earlier this month.
Yes.
So Paris, tell me a little bit about some of the other main pieces that you're seeing.
Well, an interesting part of this is a $200 million extra payment into the pension system, so a payment above what they owe actuarially. And progressive groups are not happy about that, so they're going to be wrestling over that. They want that money to go toward direct programs to help people who are suffering. The thing about that is you're making the pension systems in Chicago, we know, have been horribly underfunded for so many years. And $200 million now turns into $1 billion in 10 years, and that's $1 billion you can't spend on social programs in 10 years. So any fiscal watchdog will say, if you have the opportunity right now in a time where there are revenues coming in that you didn't imagine, then you've got to pay down some of these debts, even though the more attractive short-term option is to sort of give the money directly to people for relief. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not progressive groups wrestle that out of her as they debate this budget. And then also there's an increase in the police budget, which progressive groups are not happy about.
No.
And they might have to wrestle and wrangle over that before they have a final deal.
Right. I just wanted to find out, do you think this is going to be an easy budget to pass? Is there going to be a lot of fighting? Do aldermen and the mayor see eye to eye?
There's no property taxes and there's no cuts, and it's an election year. And the thing that people running for office do not want to have to run on are property tax increases or cuts. Mm-hmm. So my initial thought was it would be fairly easy to pass, but it does seem like if progressive groups are unified on this stuff, then she might just have to negotiate a bit, but ultimately it will pass. I'm not sure whether every single progressive on the city council is unified and wants to cause trouble. So
Okay. All right.
I think it's going to ultimately pass. It might be tweaked a bit. That's my final analysis of that.
Okay. This is Reset. I'm Lisa Labus in for Sasha-Ann Simons. We're going behind the headlines with our weekly news recap. We've got Kim Egonmwan from WVON, also WBEZ's Dave McKinney, and WTTW's Paris Schutz. A reminder, you can watch our weekly news recap live on the WBEZ Facebook and YouTube pages, and check out our video live stream right now on Reset's Facebook page. All right, I want to shift to schools and education. Now, the nation's report card came out this week. Illinois students are still performing below pre-pandemic levels on state reading and math for the second year in a row. Kim, I want to ask you, what else did the report card show? Tell me some big takeaways.
Well, one of the biggest takeaways when looking at the report card was the level of absenteeism. So students that are just, I don't know if the word is flagrant or frequent or what have you, but just that number is sky high. The percentage was really high. But we knew that coming out of COVID-19 and the major changes that had to take place during then, especially in Chicago public schools, and Chicago public schools not being ready with really a remote program, just, getting caught off guard with that, trying to get everyone some type of computer in school, that type of thing. We knew that there was going to be some loss of learning. But to this degree, I mean, it really is. It's, in some cases, they're thinking that students may have lost literally 2 years of learning.
Oh, and we're all racial and ethnic groups. They saw scores drop since 2019. How much of a cause for concern is this?
Well, it's definitely a cause for concern because honestly, the education in the state of Illinois was not going that well before COVID-19, if we're being honest. If you look at, for example, in the city of Chicago, in a ward like mine, I'm in the 6th ward, there's only one school that is rated as being passing.
Out of how many?
Out of at least, there are at least 20 to 25 schools, elementary and high schools. So this is an issue, and this is something, it's a crisis point because you have to build people to be able to perform and to be competitive. So this is an issue that we're really going to have to take stock. How do you get those math scores up? How do you get those reading scores up? It's not all COVID.
Okay. All right. And Chicago did have a little positive news to share about schools. Graduation rates are up and school staffing is up despite a continued decline in enrollment. Paris, what do you make of this good news out of CPS?
I think it's a bit of a silver lining. I mean, as Kim said, scores are still not where they were pre-pandemic, and absenteeism is still alarming. It's clear that the shutdowns and the pandemic cost kids a lot in Chicago public schools and everywhere else. I mean, any gain they're going to celebrate, that's good, but there's still a long way to go. There was a huge problem during the pandemic with absenteeism. The CPS lost track of thousands and thousands and thousands of students. Yeah. So it's a big uphill climb. I don't think they've crossed the finish line yet in terms of getting back where they need to be. All
right. Kim, can you jump in here? Enrollment dropping. What do you think that could bring about 3 or 5 years down the line?
Well, with the enrollment dropping, and it is a very, not steep, but it's a huge number in which the enrollment is dropping. We are right now in what you would call a moratorium on school closures. So we have got school buildings right now that are built many years ago, ready to accept 1,000 students, and there are 20 students roaming the halls. I think that we are looking at another push in a few years when that moratorium is up, where there will be another round of school closings that are going to be proposed. And they'll propose it on 2 levels, not just the idea that the school enrollment is down, but also the performance of the schools. We're in a desperate situation with the performance of how schools and how children are being educated.
And CEO Pedro Martinez has alluded to some plan to sort of utilize those underused buildings that would not be shutting them down. I don't think he's rolled it out yet. He's kind of teased this big plan that they've come up with, where they're gonna refocus those schools or something like that. And so we're still awaiting that.
Do you, Kim? Do you want to comment about school staffing being up? How many more teachers are we talking about, and are they getting into neighborhoods that are needed?
Well, yeah. So the school staffing coming up, well, we know that one of the things that has happened with staffing, not just with schools, but in every area, every arena after COVID-19. I don't know what it was about COVID-19 made people reevaluate where they wanted to work, how they wanted to work. And maybe it was the idea that so many things were closed and they lost jobs and they just said, I want to go into a better situation. We know that that was desperate. So it's really good to see that staffing is up. When we were at a point in some of the school systems where they were saying, you don't even have to have a degree to teach. We'll take you out of high school. We'll take you if you're a veteran with no education, all of those different things. So it's good to see that staffing is up, because I will tell you, in some schools, there are classes. There's one school that I heard of in particular where there are 9 classes that did not have a permanent teacher. So those children were have been and are subjected to substitute teachers for the entire school year. And that is no way to run a school.
No, it isn't. All right. I want to take a super quick pause here. We're speaking with Kim McGowan, commentator for WVON, WBEZ state politics reporter Dave McKinney, and Paris Schutz, reporter and anchor at WTTW-TV. They're going to stick around, and we hope you do too, because there are more big stories to get to in our weekly news recap. First, I heard that rock and roll star Jerry Lee Lewis has died. Claire Lane?
Yeah, at 87. The untamable, often outrageous rock and roll pioneer died this morning at his home in Memphis, Tennessee, a spokesperson confirmed. His talent and energy and often ego collided into piano-pumping perfection on 1950s hits like Great Balls of Fire, might remember that one, and a whole lot of shaking going on. Lewis's infamous private life also included a marriage to his 13-year-old cousin, who later alleged physical and mental cruelty. And we'll have more on this story throughout the afternoon. Also, new research suggests a person's name, specifically those that are harder to pronounce, could be making the difference between landing a job on their resume ending up in the reject pile. And saltwater is creeping up the Mississippi River. That's threatening drinking water supplies in the New Orleans area. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is building an underwater levee to try to stop it, caused by super low water levels. And we'll have more on that story during All Things Considered today at 3 o'clock. More of Reset continues next, and it's Science Friday. Stick around after 1 o'clock to learn about the science behind not why, but how cats purr. Stay with us.
WBEZ is supported by Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science in North Chicago, where interprofessional education, research, and commitment to community care combine to advance the future of healthcare. RosalindFranklin.edu.
I'm Peter Sagelit, thrilled the world to see that even in that hidebound United Kingdom, a son of South Asian immigrants could rise to become the next person to screw everything up. Join us for the news quiz from NPR. Saturday morning at 10 on WBEZ.
WBEZ is supported by Weber Furniture Service, offering reupholstery, wood refinishing, repair, and leather maintenance, serving both commercial and residential markets throughout Chicagoland. More at weberfurniture.com.
Whether you're looking for something fun, intriguing, meaningful, or, let's face it, just something to do, the WBEZ events calendar is a great place to start. See it now at wbez.org/events.
Weather for today, pretty nice for fall, mostly sunny skies. We'll get to a high close to 60. Right now we've got sunny skies, 57 degrees at O'Hare and Joliet, mostly sunny and 58. This is 91.5 WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Lisa Labus, and we're back with more of our weekly news recap. We've got the election right around the corner. Candidates are making their final pitches to voters, and there was a series of forums this week. Candidates addressed a lot of the hot-button issues in the state and the country.
Representative Brady and his party are attacking our democracy with this assault on voting rights, and I disagree with them on offlaying that program.
The one thing I like about my opponent is when he's wrong, he's really wrong.
Prosecutorial discretion is very fact-specific, case-by-case determination.
I don't seek to try to defy the governor's office. In fact, I'm statutorily responsible to represent the governor's office.
I support exceptions and regulation of big business abortion.
Yes, I'd like to codify Roe v. Wade with the restrictions per Roe v. Wade, which is consistent with Illinois law.
We have a lot to unpack from all the candidates, and here to do it, we've got our lovely and brilliant panel with us today. Kim McGowan of WVON, Dave McKinney from WBEZ, and Paris Schutz from WTTW. All right, the Sun-Times, WBEZ, WTTW hosted a Senate candidate forum last night with Democratic U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth and Republican challenger Kathy Salvi. Heard just a little bit in that clip. And Paris, you co-hosted that forum last night. What were some of the more interesting moments?
Well, first, I just want to thank the Sun-Times and WBEZ. It was a lot of fun to work with everybody, the brilliant people at your organization, so I hope we get to do that again. The two couldn't be more far apart on issues like you heard, abortion. Kathy Salvi didn't really answer the question whether or not she would vote for the Lindsey Graham bill that would outlaw all abortion federally after 15 weeks. You know, Republicans in the past had said, let's leave this to the states. So Salvi tried to sort of tout her bona fides as being against abortion, but did not want to sort of answer, but do you want this left to the states, or do you want the federal government to control this? Duckworth pounced on that. Duckworth, obviously has supported President Biden. Kathy Salvi is trying to pin all the problems of inflation on Democrats and President Biden. Duckworth mentioned a lot of bills that she has sponsored. I think one thing that was interesting was that she has sponsored a lot of bills, and they sound like they'd be very helpful, but they haven't gotten anywhere. They haven't had any momentum. Not to say that she hasn't had some successes. She sponsored the lead pipe replacement program, which, as we know in Chicago, is a huge deal. So there's going to be federal money for that. So significant accomplishments there, but a lot of things that she mentioned are her accomplishments, but they haven't gone anywhere. In terms of Kathy Salvi, she was recruited to run by Ron Gidwitz, a big GOP donor, and no national GOP, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, Gidwitz himself, they're not giving her any support or any money. That signals they just don't think she has a chance to win.
All right. So, Dave, you were watching the debate last night. Paris, you did pretty great, right?
No. Paris did
so
fabulous.
Good. No,
yeah.
so good.
I mean, it's a little bit like herding cats, and you did quite well with that.
Traffic cop, Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what stood out to you in the issues last night?
Well, I mean, the one point of agreement between the two candidates was on the Chicago Bears moving to Arlington Heights. That's
go if they want to go.
Go if they want to go, and don't let the door hit you. I mean, it was kind of a, for Duckworth, that Arlington Heights is in her old congressional district, so there's some loyalties there. Salvi is a suburbanite as well, so I think both of them were saying, go ahead, do it. I think, what you're looking for in a race like this are breakthrough moments, things that are going to go viral. And there just weren't a lot of those things that, it was an opportunity that the pressure was really on Salvi to try to score those breakthroughs. And I just don't think her debate performance wasn't bad, but it also lacked that kind of thing that people would be talking about the next day and the day after that and the day after that.
In fact, Duckworth probably landed the biggest zinger when Salvi said she was against Biden's student debt relief program. Duckworth says, well, I think it's hypocritical. You took PPP loans that you didn't ever have to pay off, so why is it good for you? You're her law firm and not good for students.
Got it. All right. So one topic that was touched on during the debate was immigration reform. Got a clip of tape. Let's take a listen.
I think that we have to do things like make sure that people pay fees, fines, and penalties for having broken the law to be here. Find a way for them to work and earn and pay into Social Security and pay taxes so that they're not being taken advantage by being paid under the table.
We have a humanitarian crisis at our border. 3 million people in the last 2 years have crossed this border, and they are dying by the day, and it's underreported.
All right. So, Kim, this is a topic that's top of mind for voters, certainly in border states. But what about Illinois? Is this something that Illinois voters are talking about?
Well, this is an interesting election, okay, because there's very low energy around this election just in general. And the number one issue that everyone has made the issue is abortion in the state of Illinois, which right now is it's going to be a protected healthcare decision, right? But immigration, I will say that it has come more to the forefront now in the city of Chicago that we have received over around 4,000 people who have been bused here from Texas and other places. And for the first time, a sanctuary city, which is what we call ourselves in the way that we operate, has had to deal with this crisis firsthand and is running out of spaces. We were just talking about the utilization of school buildings that were shut down. Well, there's an alderman in the 20th Ward, Jeanette Taylor, who was told to try and figure out how to repurpose one of those school buildings for some of these people, and in the middle of an African-American ward. And she's like, we don't even have the language services for people here. So now that we're trying to figure this out, I don't think that it is ripe for this election, but for this next election, coming up in the municipal election next year, I think that this may be one of those issues, especially when we're talking about whether or not non-citizens will get a right to vote, for example, which has happened in other cities.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So anybody, what do you think are the top issues motivating voters in Illinois right now? Dave?
Well, I mean, I think the economy is probably front and center.
Yeah.
I mean, in our polling earlier in the month, that's what that showed. I mean, abortion, ironically is not the right word, but surprisingly, it was pretty far down on the list. I mean, it was drawing not the level of support that you would think that it would draw given what happened. And I think part of that is due to the fact that, it's all about timing. And when the court made its decision on the Dobbs case, that was back around Memorial Day. And so, people have kind of gotten accustomed to the shock of that. I think the shock of it has settled in. And so, I think people really now are feeling the impact of an uncertainty about what life looks like 6 months from now. Will they have a job or not? And when the economy, when it's an issue like this, it tends not to favor incumbents. And so that's kind of the rule of thumb here. I don't know how it's going to play out in Illinois necessarily.
The top of the Republican ticket, Darren Bailey, they've gone all in on crime and the Safety Act as the main issue. I mean, all the ads that are run by this PAC, who is run by the radio host Dan Proft, funded by to the tune of tens of millions of dollars from the billionaire packaging magnate Dick Uihlein, they're all about scaring people about crime. So they've gone all in on that issue. The thing is, they went all in on that issue in the Republican primary. Irvin went all in on that issue, and he finished third. It was a mistake. It was the economy that was the big issue. So it might prove again to be a mistake to focus all of your resources on the crime issue when in the polling, as Dave said, abortion is kind of low. Crime is below the economy in terms of voter concerns.
Sure.
In these polls that have come out, and Mr. Proft has made millions of dollars in fees from Dick Uihlein funding all these ads in favor of Darren Bailey.
All right.
James Carville, 1992. It's the economy, stupid.
Right, exactly. All right, in Pennsylvania, we've got this tight Senate race between Democratic Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman and Republican challenger Dr. Mehmet Oz, who is backed by President Trump. Now, if Oz wins, the Senate could flip to GOP control. Dave, do you think Duckworth's seat is pretty secure in the blue column?
Well, I mean, you hear pundits nationally talking about Republicans gaining momentum around the country a little bit. There'd been talk about a big red wave, and then that kind of eased off a little bit, and now it's starting to come back a little bit. But the groups that I tend to look to, the nonpartisan groups like the Cook Political Report, the University of Virginia's Sabato Crystal Ball, they still have the Illinois U.S. Senate race in the safe D category, meaning that it's as safe as it can be for a Democrat. So I think that's one reality. The polls that we've seen taken in Illinois bear that out. Emerson College and WGN they were most recently in the field. They had a 49-39 edge for Duckworth, and that corresponds pretty much with what our polling with the Sun-Times showed earlier in the month. It was about a 50-36 spread. So, again, it's a big gap for Salvi to make up.
Right. So if we're talking a little bit about polling across the country, some of it suggests that Republicans are gaining momentum in House and Senate races going into the November midterms. And I would love to know, do you trust the polls, Paris?
Gosh, to some extent, but I don't think we should rely on them entirely. They're a snapshot in time.
Sure.
It's not concrete. I think 2016 taught us all that. I interviewed Senator Durbin earlier this week, and I said, so what is your intel telling you about whether your party's going to keep the Senate? He says it's 50-50 because there's these handful of races, like you mentioned, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Ohio, Wisconsin, that just seem to be teetering around that 50-50, and it's just anyone's guess which way they're going to go. And the Fetterman-Oz race in Pennsylvania is interesting. Obviously, Fetterman appeared in that debate. He's very impaired because of the stroke he suffered.
Yeah.
It's very fair for voters to ask, whether that concerns them. But I do have to compare that to former Republican Illinois U.S. Senator Mark Kirk, who suffered a pretty bad stroke while in office.
Right.
And he was missing in action for several months. And most of the coverage of him was positive and inspirational. And, folks were welcoming him when he made it back to the Capitol. They were cheering and applauding. And It's interesting the contrast between that. He wasn't running for office at that time,
right?
But this isn't unprecedented.
But he didn't win, right?
No.
When he ran,
Duckworth beat him later.
Yeah.
So Duckworth ended up beating him later. But the coverage of him, the news coverage was mostly inspirational, and he suffered this thing, and he's on the mend, and he's making his comeback.
Right. So Kim, what do you take on the polls? Do you put any trust in those?
I don't know who they poll. I've never been polled, so that's one of the reasons why I'm
Good point.
who do they poll? How are those people feeling on that day? And yeah, because after 2016, I just have no faith in polls anymore.
All right. This is Reset. I'm Lisa Labus, and if you're just tuning in, we're in the middle of our weekly news recap, and with me is Kim McGowan of WVON, Dave McKinney of WBEZ, and Paris Schutz of WTTW. A reminder, you can watch our weekly news recap live on the WBEZ Facebook and YouTube pages, and you can talk to us in the YouTube chat box. I might read your comments and questions about these stories on the air. So let's get back to candidate forums. Paris, you were very busy this week, but also was your colleague, WTTW's Amanda Vinicky, who hosted a forum between two of the three candidates for Attorney General. We had Democratic incumbent Kwame Raoul and Republican Tom DeVore, and not surprisingly, a major topic there was eliminating cash bail, the SAFETY Act. Paris, give us a rundown. I know you were watching.
Yeah, no, and great job to my colleague Amanda Vinicky, and also great job to Tina Sfondelis, who co-hosted with me last night. The SAFETY Act is a big point of contention between those two. You heard in that soundbite Attorney General Raoul say he supports it. He said that there need to be some tweaks. The Democrats look like they are going to get together after the election to sort of tweak the language to get rid of some of the uncertainty and ambiguity there. Tom DeVore obviously echoing the other states' Republicans, saying that this whole thing is a big disaster waiting to happen, that it's going to let dangerous people back on the streets and it's going to increase crime. DeVore really kind of built his fame on opposing Pritzker's COVID mandates, taking Pritzker to court. He utilized that to then run for office. So those things were expected, the fact that they were going to differ on that. I thought it was interesting that DeVore, on the question of will you enforce the Chicago Police Department consent decree, which the Attorney General has a key role here in enforcing this very big police reform item, DeVore said, of course I would. That sounds to me a little bit more moderate than others in his party. So it might be his way of trying to tack to the center a little bit. We know that his stance against mask mandates stokes the base. But to win in Illinois, you're going to have more than the conservative base, and to say something like, well, yes, I would continue the road to police reform for the Chicago Police Department. Maybe you try to pick off a few moderate voters, but again, however much we trust polling, the polling doesn't have that race very close. Although, there's such a range in these polls. There's a poll that says Governor Pritzker's up by 22, and then another one that says he's up by 9.
You just don't know.
You have to be careful because these campaigns will put out their own push polls, and some of that is designed to say, hey, see, look, this race is a lot closer than we thought. Give us more money. So you just have to be skeptical where these polls are coming from.
Right. Kim, I want to get your breakdown on about the SAFETY Act. Tell me a little bit about what that does, and for listeners who might not be familiar.
Sure. Just a little bit of background, though. In 2020, when we were right in the middle of COVID-19 and also this coming off of the George Floyd murder, it was a time at which the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus really buckled down to try and come up with some ways in which to improve in 4 areas: criminal justice, economics, healthcare, and I believe education. Those were 4 areas. So with criminal justice, they came up with the SAFETY Act, and it has many provisions, and no one talks about any of the rest of them.
Right.
But the one that they talk about is the elimination of cash bail, which has been a movement across the country with many of the prosecutors coming into office. So this idea of eliminating cash bail, so that right now if you go before a judge for being accused of some type of crime, the judge can decide to set a cash amount that you have to post before you can get out. But in this case, the judge will no longer can give you a cash bail, but will only decide whether or not you are a threat to society, whether or not you should be let out, or should you stay inside of jail, which is something they were supposed to do even before. So it really is not that much of a change. However, it has been skewed and it has been turned into what people are calling a purge law. And they're saying that on January 1st, there are going to be all kinds of people let out of jail and not put in jail who are committing murders and crimes and sexual assaults. And it's just the way in which the information is being spun out of control about this. The messaging has been just not very good. People who have been in favor have been playing a lot of catch up with it. Yeah. So,
Dave, what's your take on how this race for Attorney General is shaping up?
Well, I mean, I think these down ballot races, the Attorney General, the Treasurer, the Secretary of State, they're all kind of, you see those generic ballot questions that are you going to vote for a Democratic member of Congress or a Republican member of Congress? They're a good barometer of where people's political mood is. These down ballot races are that's our version of them in Illinois.
Sure.
And I think the fact that you have both Pritzker and you have Duckworth with seemingly these large leads. You have to question whether they're going to have coattail effects from that. And then, you go back to 2020 and even 2016, you look at the presidential performance here that Donald Trump had, and he just got swamped in both elections. So the fact that Illinois has this track record of voting Democratic, I don't see anything right now that suggests to me that it's going to...
Well, no, and I agree with you, Dave,
Yeah.
but the one thing to keep your eye on is turnout. I mean, turnout could make the difference. Republican base is motivated to turn out. And will Democratic voters in the city and in the suburbs turn out? We see turnout depress when their party is in power. And right now, in terms of early voting in Chicago, the numbers are anemic. I mean, now we just had all the sites in the 50 wards open up, but it's very, very, very low right now.
Well, the flip side of these polls, too, that you have to kind of wonder about, if you're in a campaign and you have a double-digit lead, it's sort of like the sports analogy of playing with a lead. It's hard to do because it kind of, it can tamp down enthusiasm. And that's a thing that all the campaigns have to be wary of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about voting. Paris, you just mentioned that, Chicago open, it's got now, 100 voting sites open?
I think it's 52 because you've got one in each ward and then you've got two super sites.
Okay. And so for early voting, Chicagoans, you can go anywhere.
Well, for early voting, you can go to one of the designated spots in your ward. So depending on what ward, like the 47th ward, the 6th ward, the 5th ward, there's going to be one spot, a library or a school. And as I alluded to before, the numbers were like, I guess as of a day or two ago, were like 5,000 early votes. I mean, that is really small. Now, it was only the super site that was available. And there have been a couple 160,000 mail-in requests, I think, something along that. So that's a bigger number. But, on Election Day, because of remap, the precincts have changed.
Yeah.
So folks might be a little confused about where they're supposed to go.
Right.
There might be a lack of election judges. There might be some bottlenecks, which is more argument to vote early to avoid the lines and stuff on actual Election Day.
Right. I want to touch a little bit about Secretary of State race since Jesse White has been in that office for, the last 100 years. So
and top vote getter.
Right. He is a top vote getter. Absolutely. Yeah. So now, Paris, you also hosted a candidate forum for two of the three candidates for that office. You were talking with Democrat Alexi Janulius and Republican Dan Brady. So tell us briefly the major issues and topics relevant to that race.
How long do I have to wait in line when I'm going to get my driver's license?
I hate the DMV.
That is the issue. I mean, the Secretary of State's office in Illinois is very interesting. I mean, it oversees so many things. It's the chief record keeper of the state of Illinois. Like for reporters, when you want to go in and see like who owns a business, or you go to the Secretary of State's website and they have all that information. It's a chief librarian of the state. The thing that it doesn't do that it does in many other states is run elections. So it doesn't have a huge role in elections here. So the DMV or the driver services facility, as I like to say, is the big function here, and they both are kind of in agreement. We want to modernize it. We want to cut down the lines. We want Janulius has said that we want electronic licenses and title.
Right.
Brady in the past has not agreed with that, although this week he said, "Oh yeah, I want to do that too." So they have similar ideas to sort of streamline that office. It's interesting. The last we heard from Janulius publicly was when he lost that Senate race in 2010 to Mark Kirk. The issues of his family bank that went under came up. The issues of his role as treasurer the Bright Start college savings program. There was an investment fund that had lost money. It was during the recession there. So Janulius has had to kind of defend those old kind of attack lines. Dan Brady, he's a Republican. It doesn't seem like he's, riding the coattails of Darren Bailey. I don't think he's holding hands with Darren Bailey. No. He's not seeking Trump's endorsement. He's kind of been a more kind of establishment Illinois Republican. Says very clearly, of course, Joe Biden won the election. So again, a more moderate. I should say that, they're both eminently qualified. I mean, Janulius led a big state department, the Treasurer's Office. Dan Brady's been a legislator for 22 years. They both came with very specific ideas of what they want to do. And so it's just a matter of, this one might just come down to party lines. Whether you vote Democrat on the ticket, you'll probably vote for Janulius. Republican, you'll probably vote for Brady. But Brady's trying to get some crossover votes.
Yeah.
And the Secretary of State's office is not that political.
All right.
And one other point. I'm sorry, I've been talking too long. Before Jesse White, and he's been there 24 years. Let's remember that this office was a launch pad to Illinois governor. And you have to wonder with Janulius whether he's very ambitious, whether that's what he wants. You're going to command an office.
He didn't say that's what he wanted.
He said, no, that's not what I want. You're commanding an office of 4,000 workers that in the distant past, might have been utilized on weekends to go, do political work for you. So it's very attractive.
But it gives you
reason.
It gives you the most name recognition
Sure.
of any of the
Everybody
positions.
sees
your
your name.
is
Right.
everywhere.
Exactly.
And
It's
your picture
very,
in those
very
offices.
public.
But it's so interesting. Like you go back in ancient history when Jesse White was first running for this office in 1998. The issues were so different back then because like you were talking about corruption in that office because George Ryan had come out of that office and it was pay to play and we had the Willis crash and on. And it's just so like sedate right now. We're just talking about lines, which I guess is a good thing.
Yeah.
That primary was not sedate.
No. I would love.
That's right.
I would love to keep talking about this, but we got to keep moving on. I've had Paris Schutz here with me from WTTW, also Kim McGowan of WVON, and Dave McKinney. We need to take a short break, and then we're going to be back with more of our weekly news recap. But first, inflation is up again. Here's Claire Lane.
Yeah, womp womp. Inflation and wages continue to climb rapidly, which is bad news for the Fed. The Federal Reserve's preferred inflation measure showed that price gains remained fast in September, and a gauge of wages was climbing pretty quickly. Also, people incarcerated at Stateville, Illinois Correctional Center are being moved. This is while the state works to restore water in a large portion of the prison near Joliet. For nearly a week, people have been without working sinks or showers. And officials in the South Philippines say torrential rains set off flash floods and landslides that swamped a southern province, killing at least 42 people and leaving 16 others missing. Our reset picks back up in just a moment. And at 1 o'clock, it's Friday, so we'll bring you Science Friday. Stay with us.
WBEZ is supported by Milwaukee School of Engineering, where students can learn at the forefront of artificial intelligence with degrees in computer science, software engineering, and more. Information on scheduling campus tours can be found at msoe.edu.
WBEZ is also supported by Allstate Arena, presenting Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli on May 20th, 2023. Tickets for Andrea Bocelli at Allstate Arena are available Monday, October 31st at 10 a.m. at Ticketmaster.com.
WBEZ is supported by the Gift Theater, presenting The Locusts by Chicago playwright Jennifer Rumberger. An FBI agent returns to her hometown to investigate a series of murders and confronts her past. Through November 19th, gifttheater.org.
Mostly sunny afternoon ahead. We'll get to a high of 60. This is WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Lisa Labes in for Sasha-Ann Simons. And if you're just tuning in, it's our weekly news recap. We're digging into the top local stories of this week. And here with us in the studio are Kim McGowan of WVON, Dave McKinney of WBEZ, and Paris Schutz from WTTW. So some of the Chicago police news this week was a police officer was found to have ties to the far-right group, the Proud Boys, but the department chose not to fire him. Paris, how are members of the city council reacting?
Not happy at all, especially the progressive members, worried that someone who is sympathetic to the Proud Boys, which has been designated, I think, by the Southern Poverty Law Center and the ADL as a hate group, anti-Semitic, racist, homophobic, all those things. It's very curious because the police department defended just suspending this officer, saying they don't have much evidence that these allegations are true, that he has these ties. But the inspector general said, well, you better go back and investigate again, because we're pretty clear in our own investigation. He lied about talking to the FBI about ties to the Proud Boys. And there is a preponderance of evidence. I don't know what the gap is here. I don't know why the police department's own internal investigation differs so much from the inspector general's investigation. But if you listen to David Brown, the superintendent, they say this officer, they were only going to suspend him like 5 days. He said, suspend me 120 days. I know this looks bad. So they're kind of making him out to be a good guy that was caught up in a misunderstanding. The inspector general's pretty clear that this is troubling and needs to be looked at further.
Yeah, Kim, what do you make of this? It's just a 120-day suspension.
Well, because the information that's coming from both sides and both sides being on the same side, which is so confusing and it's frustrating, because they're saying we do have evidence, but the superintendent says we don't have evidence. We don't even know who the person is. So we're serving with this person. We don't even know who they are. We know that he or she, I don't even know if it's a male. I mean, they are suspended. And it's troubling because we're talking about a police department that is literally under investigation for not just use of excessive force issues, but racist practice issues, with a consent decree that has been in place for several years now that we never meet any of the benchmarks on time. We just fired the guy who was actually overseeing the whole process. How do you trust the police department? How do you get the average citizen in the city of Chicago to trust the police department when they see things like this? And this is one of the, like Paris just said, Southern Poverty Law Group, FBI, everyone has labeled this organization anti-Semitic and also, of course, just a white supremacist group.
Yeah, Dave, do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, I mean, it just seems like it's one of those things where if those relationships exist like that, I mean, do you want to be the person who has a problem and come face to face with an individual like this?
Right.
Like, I think that's a legitimate question that the police department has to answer. And none of us are real comfortable with what happened on January 6th and the role that that group played there. So I mean, it's these are all legitimate questions, and the council, I think, is they're not going to let this go.
It's also curious why the mayor is, she's basically backing her police superintendent.
Yeah.
Saying,
She said it was about accountability.
It was about accountability, and and the mayor who said, like, don't think as a black woman and a lesbian, I'm not going to stand for any kind of nonsense. So it is curious why she's not joining the chorus to get more answers here. Maybe because politically, she just doesn't want to be seen going against her police superintendent as this election gears up.
All right. Let's move over to a couple of business stories. Crain's Chicago Business reported most Chicago employers are requiring people to come into the office at least one day a week. That isn't a whole lot. Dave, what do you think about pandemic work from home, or at least hybrid work? Is that here to stay?
Well, it sure feels like it's here to stay. I mean,
Yeah.
but I read something the other day that if we're heading into a recession, there was a survey of employers that suggested that perhaps these folks that are getting used to the hybrid model, work from home, should be maybe a little worried about their job security, because out of sight, out of mind means that employers might not be knowing what you're up to and knowing what production you're having. So I mean, I think people are getting used to the idea of working from home and not wanting to give it up. But I think it's just hard to get your head around when you're out on the expressways. You don't have the same kind of level of traffic as you did before. The trains, the CTA, everything. It feels like it's here to stay.
Yeah. Kim, do you have a take on work at home, pandemic, traffic, everything?
I think that people were thrown into a situation. So many were just cut loose from jobs in particular. But then the idea that they had to work from home, they got used to not making that hour-long commute going and coming someplace. And I thought they were doing a pretty good job of having high productivity because, trying to figure out how to do that at home, it sounded like it was working out. I think people have gotten a little spoiled by it and don't necessarily want to come back to the rat race that's in the downtown area. But that translates into fewer rentals downtown. It definitely depresses the economy for your down. You can park downtown now.
Yeah.
So that's a very strange situation to be in.
The Loop still feels like a ghost town
Yes,
on
it
many
does.
days, and there's all these restaurants and other businesses that relied on all the foot traffic. I mean, I'm old-fashioned. I like being at work. I like being around people in person. I can't do Zoom. I just nod off or get distracted too easily. So I really hope that more people decide to be in, if they feel safe, in the office more, because we need to socialize. We need to be together. We need to bounce ideas off each other.
Okay. All right. So I promised at the top of the show that we were going to talk about karaoke. All right. So the Chicago Sings Karaoke competition is now entering the third round. We've got 6 finalists. Are you paying attention to this one, Dave? You look like all excited about it. Yeah? No?
Why not? Why not?
Why not? Why not? All right. Paris, are you excited? You're a singer.
Yeah, I play the keyboard and sing, and I haven't paid any attention. I just don't like to do karaoke. I just maybe Frank Sinatra or something, like crooning. Maybe I would do that, because I don't do
I could
that.
see that.
Yeah.
I
So
could see that.
I haven't. It's great for the city. It's fun. It's a great thing.
All right. What about Kim? Are you paying attention to?
I'm not paying attention
No.
to it at all. I will say that on the occasion that I do get to go and do karaoke and torment people with my voice, my song of choice is Kiss by Prince. So I will say that I do enjoy screaming at the top of my lungs for that song. People do ask me to stop.
They do? Oh, see, I would not. I would not. And you're certainly welcome to,
No, my mom's
bust
listening.
it out
She's
right
telling
now.
me to stop right now.
But so here's what's going to go on. So we've got a round, 6 finalists, third round, and they're going to perform now in front of a panel of celebrities. I don't know. Does this mean Common and Chance the Rapper are going to hang out and choose? I have no idea.
That's wild.
Right? So the top performer will be crowned Chicago's karaoke champion and get $5,000. So I know your karaoke song, Kim. Dave, do you have a go-to karaoke?
Well, I think the one that last brought the house down was ever hear of the Trogs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wild Thing?
Wild Thing.
Yeah,
Yes. Right. Oh, Paris. So Frank Sinatra, maybe?
Sure. Let's do what's the song? It's 2:45. There's no one. Set 'em up, Joe. One for my baby, one more for the road.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice.
What about you?
Me? Oh, I have to admit I haven't done karaoke that often, but I think one of my I'd probably do anything from Motown or Waterloo by ABBA.
There you go.
Probably
There you
be where I go to. So, all right, we need to leave it there. I've had so much fun. Thank you so much for everybody
you.
for being
Thanks,
here.
Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
We've got Kim McGowan, a commentator for WVON and attorney, Dave McKinney, state politics reporter at WBEZ, Paris Schutz, a reporter and anchor for WTTW. Thanks again. Have a great weekend, everybody.
You too. Thank you so much.
They're playing your song.
They're playing
Yeah,
my
there
song.
it is.
It's Waterloo. Thanks, everybody. Sasha will be back on Monday.